Hello, folks. This is Rick Crosson. I'm your candidate for U.S. Congress here in Wisconsin's 8th District. Welcome to my home. Welcome to the first of many Fireside Chats. For a lot of you who grew up in the early years, you're used to hearing conversations about things called the Fireside Chat, made popular by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and then later by Jimmy Carter. The intent of those fireside chats was to do something in a more conversant tone and a more comfortable setting, to have conversation with America, to inform, to reassure, and to put aside some fear that quite honestly was gripping the nation at the time, especially during World War II. FDR famously said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And I know what he meant, because having fear or being fearful diverts energy. And it certainly takes away from the energy and the cause that we need to put that energy toward to resolve these issues. And so I get what he means. As I go around talking to folks and just trying to understand how people are feeling about what's going on in our country today, fear is one of the words that is most commonly used and referred to. So how do we combat that in and of itself first, so that we can focus on resolving these issues, putting this country back on track towards this whole notion of a more perfect union? So that's what I'm here to do in this kind of conversant, homespun setting. There's no props. There's nothing that we put together in this to make it look more homier than it is. This is my home. The things that you see on the mantelpiece behind me are all reflective of elements of who I am and how I think about things. But first, let me give you some insight as to who I am. For those of you who have been following my campaign, you're going to hear some of these things again. For those of you who are just tuning in to who is Rick Crosson, you're going to hear this for the first time. So a little bit about who I am and why I'm sitting here in Wisconsin. I am the son of an Army sergeant, a command sergeant major. My father, Sergeant Major Early C. Crosson, left this world back in 2018. My dad was a very self-confident individual. He was the kind of guy that when he walked in a room, everybody sat a little straighter in their chair. I'm very much aware of his influence even to this day. My father was the kind of person that held us accountable for our actions. He did not tolerate liars, people who were deceptive, and he always told us to leave things better than they were when we got there. He was one that would not hesitate to make immediate correction if correction was needed, but he was always fair, and you knew where you stood with him all the time. He was a great influence on me in my life. I emulated him. I aspired to do better than him in so many other ways. It's why I joined the Army and became an Army officer. And my conversation with him at the time when I was a youngster was, hey, Dad, when I grow up and I get in the Army and I come out, I'm going to be a second lieutenant, and you're going to give me my first salute. And he says, okay, son, let's see you do it. And we ultimately did that on my commissioning day back in June of 1980. And I have a photo I could show you at some point where Sergeant Major Early C. Crosson is rendering the first salute to Second Lieutenant Rick Crosson, and me handing him the ceremonial silver dollar that is symbolic of that first salute that an enlisted soldier renders an officer. So I was proud to have gotten that from my father. So I graduated from college at Seattle University with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice in June of 1980. That same day, I was commissioned as a second lieutenant of infantry in the U.S. Army with a regular Army commission. And from there, I went straight to Fort Benning, Georgia. And at Fort Benning, upon completion of the infantry officer basic course, I was shipped to Fort Rucker, Alabama, which is now called Fort Novosel, where I went through flight school. I was an Army aviator. I spent my first formative years, or all of my years in the military as a U.S. Army aviator. And I flew in combat aviation units ranging from air cavalry units to attack helicopter battalions to air assault battalions and air assault brigades. I served in units like the 6th Cavalry Brigade, the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment in Germany, and the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I also served in various support roles as a joint service officer. My last duty assignment was that as military liaison officer to the government of Mexico. And we spent a lot of time doing some very interesting and important things along the southwest border and in our relations with the government of Mexico. So I'm very familiar with the southwest border, the border between Mexico and the United States, and I fully understand and appreciate the realities of border security. So that's the first part of my world and my life. I'm the father of 3 and the grandfather of 8. My son is a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army for the next, as I'm videotaping this, for 1 more week. And then he will be retiring himself from the military after 20 years of honorable service. I'm very proud of my boy. He, like his grandfather and like his father and like his uncle, served his country honorably. And so I'm very proud of him. He is a combat veteran, 3 times over, And I am going at the end of this week to fly down and be with him on his last day in service. My son is retiring from the U.S. Army at the end of this month being February, after 20 years of honorable service. I, for one, am a proud parent of an individual who has kept it all together with his family and his service to the nation. And now he steps into the world that I'm currently in, where both father and son are military retirees, still moving forward, still looking forward to serving our country, in new and exciting ways. So I'm very happy to be with him as he steps into this new element of his journey. My middle daughter, Deanna, is working for a wonderful philanthropic organization in Washington State. And for what I understand about this organization, they do great things to provide grant money to organizations that are interested in furthering the goals of peace and economic security and stability and environmental issues of concern to specifically in and around the Pacific Northwest. She just recently got a promotion to run a large element of their finance and accounting department, and I'm very proud of her. She's a single mom with three young ladies. My oldest granddaughter, her daughter, is 20 years old and making her way in the world. And my daughter also has twin girls who are 7 years old at the time of this video. And my son he and his wife have 5 kids. So I have 8 grandchildren from my first 2 kids. My youngest, Jasmine, is making her way with Broadway aspirations. She's living and working in New York City after having come from working aboard Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. And she's a super talented young lady. You should check her out. Jasmine Crosson. She is, I don't like to brag on my children, but I'm trying to stay humble, but she's like Whitney Houston level good. She's that good. You ought to check her out. She is, I'm very proud of her. She's graduated with a bachelor's degree in fine arts from UW-Stevens Point, and from there she is paving her own path. I taught her how to be a strategist in the way she thinks about things, so she's not going into any of this with a haphazard set of just raw ideals. She has a plan, and she's executing her plan, and I'm very proud of her as well. So that's who I am, and I'm here in Wisconsin. All of my kids are sprinkled to 3 parts of the country, one in New York City, my son down in Georgia, my daughter in Washington State. And I have the kind of home here where if they all were here and visiting with all of my grandchildren, everyone would have a place to sleep. And I feel very fortunate in that sense. But I'm also very keenly aware that there are a lot of folks who are struggling and who are without those kinds of opportunities, or those opportunities were not made available for them. So I'm very sensitive to the fact that when one person is suffering, everybody is suffering. And that, for me, is what's motivating me to get into this contest and into this fight for democracy and for equality and for prosperity for everybody. So I talked a little bit about how I was in my military life. When I retired from the Army back in 2000, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia at the time. And at the time, I had every intention of staying in Atlanta, Georgia. I was looking for a job. Couldn't find one that I thought was a good fit. And one of my former commanders, a gentleman who I, to this day, love and respect, when he retired from the military, he moved up to a city called Green Bay, Wisconsin, to work for a trucking company. You might have heard of it, Schneider National. And I remember when I retired from the military, I gave him a call and just seeing how he was doing, really. And it was at that time when he said to me, "Rick, I think there's some opportunity for you up here in Green Bay, Wisconsin." And they're looking for leadership. Now, a little background between me and this gentleman, he was my commander. He was the commander of the 101st Aviation Brigade. At the time, the largest aviation brigade in the U.S. Army. It was 3 times larger than any other aviation brigade in the U.S. Army. And I was his operations officer, what we call the S3 for that brigade. And together we moved mountains. We did so many things, wonderful things, that moved that brigade and moved that division forward, and the U.S. Army. And so he knew how I worked. He respected the work that I did and the results that we achieved, and he saw where I could take that same skill and apply it up here with Schneider National. So I came up, interviewed for a leadership position, got the role, packed up, and moved up here. And I've been here ever since 2001. I stayed at Schneider for about 9 years and pretty much went as far as I could go or needed to go. Saw some opportunity outside of Schneider, still in the transportation and logistics field. I'll talk more about that in some detail here in a minute. But then I left Schneider to pursue some next level, executive level role, ultimately landing with a company called DeBoer Transportation as their chief operating officer. And I was in that role, running that company for 9 years, and retired about, it would be 5 years ago. And then, so I'm now officially retired. So now we're at this point where I have retired from the military. I've worked extensively in the transportation and logistics business. And now I am done working, but still filled with life and energy and motivation and a desire to give back to the community. So I'm here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. My kids are all out making their way in the world, and I'm here by myself. So I said to myself, look, there's some things you can do with the skill set that you have. Why not look around and see what elements of the community can you get yourself involved with? Now, this was at a time, this was back in 2024. And it's funny how God makes a way for you, because during that same time, there was what in essence was a pretty scandalous issue that pops up in the Green Bay School District with regard to their newest superintendent. Without going into all the details, the bottom line is there was a shakeup at the superintendent level that created a big stir in the community. And I remember a friend of mine texted me and said, hey, are you looking at this thing going on in the Green Bay School District? And I wasn't aware of it. And they said, hey, Rick, look at this. So I looked at it, and this individual was currently on suspension. And then one of the school board members had resigned. I later learned that the resignation was unrelated to the issue and the scandal, but what it did was create an opening, a vacancy on the Green Bay School Board. So that evening, when there was a school board hearing, I was sitting here in the living room, and I was motivated to get up, put my coat on. I wasn't dressed. I had sweats on. I just put my coat on, got in the car, and drove down to the school board meeting, where there were over 100 people yelling at the school board for this whole issue with that particular superintendent. And I didn't really know any of the details, but I walked in there. I put my name on the list of people to get in line to talk to the school board about what was going on. I had gotten there late, so there was a pretty long line of people in line to take their turn to address the school board. So I just stood and waited my chance to speak to the board. I waited for about 2 hours because there was that long of a line of people who were very upset with what was going on at the time, very upset. And they were venting on the school board. Now, if you've ever sat on a public board and have ever been addressed by the public, you know that the board members cannot respond to anything that is being said to them. They just have to sit there and take it. So I watched all of those board members take over 2 hours of some pretty heated conversation, one-way conversation to them from members of the public. So I remember I was second to the last person to speak that evening. And by then, anything that I may have wanted to have said to that group had already been said by people. And so I remember what I said, and it's a matter of record. You can go find it and pull it up. But I said, hey, pretty much everything's been said. But I said, you guys as a board are at a crossroads. And you got to make a decision. If this superintendent stays, what are you going to do to improve the conditions? The other option or the other solution is if he leaves, what are you going to do to improve the conditions? And then I literally offered my help. I said, I personally am pretty hard down on myself right now because I should have known and been more involved in community affairs. I could have offered my help and assistance to the superintendent as he made his transition here to Green Bay. I could have helped him figure out ways to navigate through things. And the fact that I wasn't available is more on me. So I am making myself available to this board to offer my help and services. I have no idea what that means, but just let you know who I am. They had no idea who I was. I literally came out of nowhere. I had always been working and focused on work and getting things done, and I quite honestly was not very publicly active. So the next morning, I get a call from one of the board members, the school board members. It said, "Hey, Rick, of all the people that spoke to us last night, what you said to us resonated. And we want you to consider putting your name in the hat to be on the Green Bay School Board and get into consideration for that." And I thought about that, and I said, "Oh wow," because they needed to appoint someone to do the remaining year that was left when that one board member resigned. So I did. I put my name in the hat, interviewed. There were 16 applicants, as I remember, and of those 16 applicants, mine was the board voted to bring me onto the school board. So now here I am, Rick Crosson, retired, now a member of the Green Bay Area School Board, the fourth largest school district in the state of Wisconsin, with a budget, an annual budget that quite honestly exceeds that of the city of Green Bay itself. A lot of people don't know that. And we got a lot of things accomplished in that period of time. I certainly don't take credit for the things that were accomplished, but I jumped in there feet first, head first, mind, body, and soul, in truly getting after some root cause issues that we saw as challenging the Green Bay School District. I was known as the working board member because I was everywhere. I was going out and talking to people. I met with teachers, principals, administrators, trying to first learn what the district was all about, and then learn the larger context of how school districts function in the state of Wisconsin, where the money comes from, how money is appropriated. And oh boy, you want to talk about a cumbersome process that does not set our school districts up for success, is the way money is apportioned and allocated, and how referendums have to happen. And then talking about accountability and the whole focus of our student population, the addressing issues of inherent bias of certain groups of students, and how those students, through no fault of their own, are asked to climb out of a hole that they didn't produce, or there's negative expectations of a person just because of what group they happen to belong to. And then of the Green Bay School District itself as viewed by other districts and other private entities around the Green Bay area. So there were a lot of opportunities and challenges and things that I really, truly jumped into to get involved with. And we got a lot of good things done. So fast forward to the end of that time, I did run a race to try to stay on the board. This is when I first learned the realities of running for office as opposed to being in the office. They are two entirely different sets of skills. And quite honestly, I could have done a lot better at running that campaign had I sought the help, had I asked. So I've learned a lot of lessons about running a campaign. Not that I'm any expert at it now. Lord knows I'm still learning as I go. But so that was my time on the Green Bay School Board. So then, okay, now I'm no longer on the board, and I said, wow, what do I do with myself? I quite honestly didn't think much beyond being on the school board for another 3 years. But I was approached by some very good folks to consider running for U.S. Congress.